All right, everybody. So again, welcome to today's Accelerate Series webinar. Our topic is going to be on introducing the Asset Map Stencil Library. For those of you that I have not had the pleasure of working with in the past, my name is Leah G. McHenry. I am Asset Map Senior Training Manager. I will be taking you through the material today. This is going to be our agenda, otherwise known as our success plan. We're going to focus on the value of what stencils are. I'll show you the old view of what stencils previously used to be. We're going to go through the new stencil library. We're then going to go over how you can use stencils to help you uncover opportunities, gather information, fill in gaps, and some strategies on how you could even use Asset Map as a creative way to help you add clients completely from scratch. Of course, there's going to be tons of continued support and resources that I'll point out all throughout today's training. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to get them into the chat section of this webinar, and we'll make sure to get them answered. Now, the purpose of a stencil is that a stencil is a template of placeholders, and it's going to represent a number of different instruments from assets, insurance, and liabilities and incomes. And you can overlay these placeholders strategically on a member of a household, on a client and spouse, on a business partner and a business. And the intention of the placeholders is to really drive conversation, to ask these folks, have you thought about these different products? Are there any missing information that I'm not aware of? I think what stencils really allow us to do is to get to know our clients a little bit better. And more importantly, figure out why potentially some decisions have been made or why some decisions potentially haven't been made. And more importantly, it's going to allow us to kind of fill in gaps, because at the end of the day, we want to produce asset map reports to really drive home the conversation. Now, when it comes to stencils, you still apply them in the same way. You go into the household, you click stencil, apply stencil. Okay, that's the same process now. But in this view, this is the previous view of what it used to be. When you used to click apply stencil, it would look like this, and it would be a single dropdown. In that single dropdown, depending on your level of access, you might have 5 pre-built stencils, 6 pre-built stencils, some of you maybe 4, and then of course any of the custom stencils that you created on your own. Now, you still have the ability to create your own custom stencils completely from scratch. That has not gone away. If anything, we've just made this enhancement so that you can have even more stencils available and at your disposal. So we're going to go ahead and move into the platform now so that I can actually show you what the stencil library looks like, how we can think about using it. In order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and hop into the application here. And I think it's important for us to talk about when stencils are even used. So before I even click into a client or prospect to show you what the stencil library looks like, let's think about when we would even use a stencil. Stencils, in my opinion, are the natural next step after somebody comes through that discovery interview. If you're not familiar with Asset Map Discovery, that is our blank digital fact finder. This is a great way to onboard clients, into the platform. So that it's a blank digital fact finder. You send it off to them, they fill out the questions as best as they can, they go to the end, they click all done, it creates a new household and asset map. And there's a few different ways to navigate to discovery, right? You can click add household, click into discovery here. There's a shortcut button on the home page. In your main menu, there's a section for discovery. It really doesn't matter how you get there. It'll take you to the same place. But I might have just had this guy come through. His name is Jack Covey. Came through my inbound link. I can see it's 100% complete. This means he went through the series of questions, he added what he could, and he went to the end and he clicked all done. Therefore, a household has been built. Now, if I go into this household and I click on the asset map report, I can see that this is incomplete. All right. And this is going to be our experience sometimes. We're going to send folks through discovery and then we look at their map and it might look like this. Or we manually entered a household, we add what we knew about them, and then looking at their map, we realized we're missing some information. Or we brought this household through an integration. And once the household was created and some of the accounts came over, we realized we're still missing some information. It really doesn't matter how the household gets added in. When you're looking at a household's asset map report, which here we are looking at the digital version, if it looks like you're missing information, you likely are. And that is where we recommend from a training perspective that your natural next step is to apply a stencil. Now, again, to access the stencils, you're going to click your main menu on the upper left-hand side, this plus mark, or you can expand and you can see it says actions. Okay. And you're going to go ahead and hover over and click stencil, apply stencil. Okay. However, I personally, when I'm on the digital asset map report as a hidden gem, I like the quick actions menu the best, which is simply just a condensed version of this full actions menu that you see here. How you activate this quick actions menu is to simply just right click your mouse on the screen, and you'll have the ability to manually quickly add in instruments, members, entities, still use layouts, still access stencils, access drafts, things like that too. So if I come over here and I click apply stencil, this is the new view of our new feature, Asset Map Stencil Library. So you're now going to have two tabs. The first tab will always be My Stencils. What are my stencils? My stencils in this drop-down list will be any stencils that you built custom on your own. Or perhaps for those of you in an office setup, if your colleague created a killer stencil and they shared that stencil with you, those will appear in your My Stencils dropdown. So for a lot of you, I can't make this assumption, but I would say that for probably a lot of you, when you first click into My Stencils, you may have one or two or perhaps even none. And that just means that you haven't created any of your own custom stencils. And that's perfectly okay. Because previously you likely had 6 or 4 pre-built stencils that you maybe just really liked and were using those pretty actively. To access our pre-built stencils, you're going to go into the Public Library tab. Now, lucky for all of you, in this drop down now, you're not going to see like 4 or 6. You're probably going to see about 20 plus, okay? Because we've now made it available to you to have access to all of these wonderful stencils that we have available. Previously, depending on your level of access, there was an option for you to request some of these additional stencils that we had built. And then the determination came out of, listen, like, we don't need people to be asking whether they can have 1 or 2, or we used to cap it at 5. Let's just make all of the stencils that we've built alongside financial professionals based on some of these, time of life, occupation, niche markets that some of these people are working with. And let's make those available in a public library so that people can use them at any time. Now, it's not just that, though. Obviously, that is a huge add, right? And the enhancement is that you now have 20 plus stencils that have already been pre-built for you that you can readily use at any time, but there's some additional features you should be aware of. Now, whether you're in My Stencils and select the drop-down, there's going to be a little picture icon next to any of these stencils that you've custom built, as will the same experience be if you're in the public library. What is this picture icon? This will actually open up a preview of what that stencil is comprised of, meaning what placeholders make up this traditional fact finder stencil. If I click on it, it opens it up and it shows me, hey, if you apply this stencil to this entire household, look at all these placeholders that are going to get overlaid. And if I look at this and I say, yeah, you know what, that's actually not really what I'm looking for, well, then I could scroll back through this list. And I could say, you know what, this gentleman is actually a military pre-retiree. I'm actually going to go ahead and click on this image preview instead. And you're going to see, okay, like this stencil is comprised of all of these placeholders. And if this is something that I want to apply, I can. All right. So just know that next to any stencil, whether it's in the public library or your My Stencils section, you will have the ability to quickly preview. And how you choose to apply a stencil remains the same. Whether it's My Stencils or the public, you have to simply select the drop down. You're going to want to pick the stencil of your choosing, and then you have to decide, do you want to apply it in full or in part? Yes is in full, no is in part. We'll talk about in part in a later example. Today's example, I'm going to click apply stencil. Let me just apply the whole thing. We'll notice in a matter of seconds that all of those placeholders are now overlaid onto this map. For those of you that are new to this concept of asset map stencils, you will know that the stencil has been applied because any of these boxes in the light gray outline are a stencil placeholder. Now, one of the best practices that I personally like to train to is that when we use stencils as a way to help us fill in gaps, fact find, help us introduce topics, if you can do it, I always recommend apply the stencil prior to them coming in. So let's say that Jack and Diane are coming in about an hour, okay? I apply the stencil. It takes me a second to do that. Well, guess what? I'm maybe not prepared to talk about every single one of these placeholders. Perhaps there's some stencil placeholders here where I already have the information, or I already know that some of these things are not applicable. If something's not applicable, you already have the data for it. There's likely no way that they would have a double of something or something like that. There's really no reason to keep the placeholder on the map. It's just creating like extra clutter, if you will. So what I personally like to do is I use the search and select tool on the upper right hand side. Now this tool isn't exclusive to just stencils. This tool is available at any time. And this is where you actually have the ability to select physical instruments and or stencil placeholders and then tell the platform what to do with it. Now, in today's example, I'm going to highlight some of these stencil placeholders that I don't need. For example, they already told me their employment, and I don't think either of them are working 2 jobs just based off my initial conversation with them. So I really don't want to have an extra placeholder for employment. I can always manually add another salary or something if they're doing part-time work. Fine. They also told me that the only guaranteed income they have is Social Security. They told me that they paid off all their personal debt and they own the one home outright. So immediately there's 8 stencil placeholders here that really aren't applicable. You know, maybe I'm not really prepared to talk about individual disability at that moment in time, you know, or I'm like, you know what, I'll leave it just to ask or see if they have interest in learning more. It's up to you. Okay. Then I made those selections. Now I have to tell the platform what to do with them. In this example, I'm going to click delete and I'm going to delete those 8 stencil placeholders. Now you will notice that the remaining stencil placeholders are still here and they're not going to go anywhere until I tell the platform what to do with them. So if these folks were coming in for the meeting and I'm going to present this digitally up on the screen, maybe I also like to have paper copies in front of them as well. And this is that concept of how you can apply a stencil and then print off their asset map reports like a physical paper copy, because these placeholders are going to be on the printout as long as they're here. So in theory, I could print a copy for Jack, print a copy for Diane, print a copy for me. Okay. And some of you are like, I don't want to waste paper. That's fine. You can do it digitally. But for those of you that are like, no, it's nice to have something tangible, I would give each person a report printout of this map with these stencil placeholders, give everybody a pen, and I would still do this up on the screen so that we can have a very interactive conversation where they can actually participate. They can scribble, they can take notes, they can draw on their paper version. And I could either, you know, do the same on paper and then digitally transcribe it later if that's something that you're more comfortable with, or I could do this up on the screen. Okay, whether that's in person, they're coming in for a meeting, or perhaps if you do remote meetings via screen share, there's obviously like a lot of different tools that you can use to do that, like Zoom, Teams, etc. Okay, so what I'm looking at here, right, is their asset map report. So how would I use this? I could say, Jack, Diane, as you can see in front of you, I've printed a copy of the map that I'm starting to build for you and your family. And I've got Jack, you there in the middle alongside Diane. And I've got the most important people in your life up at the top. Now, you'll notice that underneath the 2 of you, those are your jointly owned assets. Up top is going to be that umbrella, the idea of insurance that you have. And then on each of your sides, you're going to see that we're going to break out your income cash flow sources first, followed by any of your individual assets. So think retirement assets, non-retirement, individual real estate, right? Any individual liabilities that you may have. And here's the thing. You might notice looking at your map that there's a lot of placeholders, and I took the liberty of putting those there on purpose, and here's why. The number one thing that I have to first accomplish is understand where you are today so that we can then focus on what's important to you, your goals, your concerns. Because the only way that I can help you navigate through those concerns or help you achieve those goals is I really do have to have a full understanding of where you are today. Even if all I'm going to do is help you with retirement, even if all you want me to do is help you look at things from an insurance perspective, I still need the full picture just so that I can properly advise for you, even in just a piece. And remember, this is going to be an asset for you as well. Once we have a completed map of really where you are today, you can take this home and save it for your records. Every time we meet, you know, year after year, we can update this so that you have the most up-to-date copy. That way, if you ever have to go to the bank and you need to bring some form of a legitimate statement, we can have your map. I can print a balance sheet report for you. You name it, I'm going to be able to do that. And then I could say, okay, so Jack, Diane, let me start with your income cash flow sources. Is there any additional income that you're bringing in? None. Okay, perfect. And then what about Social Security statements? Do you think that you could send me those later today? You can? Okay, great. Well, listen, I'm going to click into this placeholder and I'm simply going to click update. What that's going to do is it's going to save this permanently onto your map. And then once you send me over those statements, I'll get the values updated for you. Okay? Okay, great. So as an aside, okay, that's my little role play ended. For you all as the financial professionals on this webinar, in theory, if Jack and Diane don't have a single statement in front of them, do not be discouraged. Because guess what? Diane's going to say, well, I could send you my 401k statement later today. I haven't looked at it in a while. That's okay. You could come in here and you could add it in. You could put Diane traditional 401k. Guess what? She knows it's held at Fidelity. Okay, great. Last time she checked, she thinks it had $120,000 in it. Okay, good to know. Details tab, who's the beneficiary? Well, she knows it's her husband. The contingent is her son. Okay, great. What is she contributing? She thinks she's contributing 10 grand. She cannot even remember what the employer is matching. Fine. For now, we could put 10 grand. We'll have it start as of today because we don't care about the past. She doesn't know when she's going to retire. So I could put a default age of 65. And guess what? We could log a note. Okay. I could come in here and I could log a note that she's going to send a statement by end of day. And that's going to be Diane. That's going to send that. And she's going to say, I can mark here 10K employee contribution, and then I could put employer, and I could put a question mark, right? Because I'm still waiting on that information. So you don't forget that even through a stencil, you've got the 3 tabs. You've got the essentials tab, you've got the details tab, and you also have the notes tab. The notes tab can be found with any instrument, member, entity, and or target map. And this is a free text field. You can use this for action items. You could use this for next steps. You have to decide what you're going to use it for. But look, I just added this. My biggest pet peeve, okay, I'm just going to be transparent with you all, is when people get hung up on the map having to be perfect immediately. It doesn't have to be, okay? Because at the end of the day, like, she still has to send you the statement. So it's okay for you to put Diane traditional 401k 120, and then when she sends you the statement, you can add it later. This is the same thing that goes for if you want to take the liberty of building someone's map out as much as you can to present it to them. The value doesn't have to be 100% correct. Like, you can preface that. You can say, listen, I'm started taking the liberty building a map for you all. This is going to be an asset that we're going to use together. Now, listen, it's not perfect right now because we're going to need to get some statements. I'm going to need to see some statements for some of these accounts we haven't looked at in some time in order for these values to be correct. But at a first glance, does it look like I've covered everything here? Are we missing anything? Do you know if any of these values immediately stand out as being incorrect? Like, let me know. And you could say, like, obviously these 4 assets that I already managed, like, I know those are correct. I looked those up, but this is a new level of service I'm providing to everyone that I work with. Stencils are a really powerful tool to help you do that. And even if you want to keep things high level, they could say, well, I know I got some group life through work, and I know that I got some group disability through work. Okay, great. We don't have to spend the time filling stuff out with a stencil if we don't want to. I could simply just come in here. He wants to learn about the benefits of an annuity. Fine, I'm going to save that. Okay. Now, the thing to remember is, well, what do we do about all these extra placeholders for these stencils if we don't need it later on? Watch this. You right click your mouse, you click stencil, you click clear stencil, and in one swoop, it's going to remove all the remaining placeholders. Okay. Now, this is a little bit of a hidden gem, okay, that a lot of people aren't really aware of, but this would be a perfect example for like this household where I still need the statement for this and I don't want to forget, even though I added it into the notes section, and the notes section does flow through here to the interactive notes area where I can see any notes that have been added for members, financials, and or target maps, entities, so on and so forth. And the notes here do also flow through to the report section, specifically as a notes report, which you could choose to include or disclude as part of your deliverable. But there is a little bit of a hidden gem that sometimes people aren't aware of, and I like to call it the emoji feature. Now, don't get crazy with it, okay, because we're business professionals. But if I click into any instrument in the reference name, this could be actually a person or an entity or an instrument. If I right click my mouse, okay, there's going to be an option up here at the top that says emoji. Okay, this isn't necessarily like a direct asset map feature, but it's something that I have figured out that's been helpful for me when I'm doing work behind the scenes. So I don't get crazy with it. I like to search something like red circle, for example, and then I just click the red circle and I click update. And that's going to be a reminder for me that, hey, like I need to get that statement. Now, I'm not a part of your compliance teams, okay? So you need to be careful if you're going to use the emoji like live in front of a client. Like, for example, I could technically have this on here and I could present this and say, like, I put the red dot there because I don't want to forget to talk about this. But for some of you, you might say, well, my compliance team is going to ping me for that. Well, then you can't do it, okay? I'm not a part of each of your individual compliance teams. But what I am going to do is I'm going to share with you some hidden gems that I have found that can be something that perhaps you use strictly behind the scenes, okay? So these people, I presented to them, they went home already. And then I could use this as a way to kind of communicate with myself or my team member that's like a delegate underneath me that also has access to ASAMAP or something like that. Okay, but it is important for you to remember that as long as the emoji appears on this tile, it'll be on the printout as well. And that's where I think you have to be careful for a lot of you from compliance purposes. So please just be mindful of that. The other thing that I've seen some people use that little emoji feature for, just as a little extra to show you too, this is where also you could right click your mouse. When you do emoji, you could use something like a question mark. I like to use the gray question mark just because it's like, it doesn't stand out super, bright, but it's just a little indicator that I may have some questions that I don't want to forget to ask. I've seen a lot of people use this in preparation for annual review meetings. They'll put the little question mark, and then what they'll do is in the notes section, they'll actually type out the questions that they don't want to forget to ask. And that could be a way to help you do that as well. Okay. So obviously that's not the main focus of this webinar, but I wanted to point it out to you all just because, I like to over deliver for you all to make sure that you're getting the most out of these trainings. So just want to mention that there. All right. So let's talk about one additional feature that came with the ASAMAP Stencil Library that I think you all are going to be overly jazzed about. Okay. If you right click your mouse, you click stencil and you click apply stencil in the public library. When you select the drop down, you're now going to have these little plus marks next to any of these public stencils. What is that? Basically, what this plus mark means is that you want to take this pre-created stencil that we've given you access to, but you want to add a copy of it to your personal library, your My Stencils tab, and then potentially make adjustments to that copy version of that stencil, maybe rename it, etc. So bear with me in this example, okay? Maybe I like the traditional fact finder stencil, but I find myself deleting the same placeholders over and over again and having to manually add the same things time and time again, okay? What I could do is I could click add to personal library. I click add. It is going to take a couple seconds. It will, because it's doing a lot of work. It's creating a carbon copy of the multitude of placeholders that we saw a little bit ago. Now, adding this to my personal library, in a moment, I'll show you how it's going to look. But then I have to show you how you can actually access that copy version to then manipulate it in the way that you want it to be moving forward. Okay, so hopefully everyone's tracking with me. I'm going to select the stencil drop down here now under My Stencils. See how this now appears as 01 dot, and it just creates a carbon copy of exactly the name of what it was in the public. But I'm like, you know what? I have to change this name. I don't like the name. And I also need to change a few things about the physical stencil. Well, how can I edit this copy version? Well, guess what? You can't do it here. Okay, you can't do it here. So where are you going to do it? Well, you're going to do it here in your household index list. Now, for many of you that have joined me on webinars in the past, okay, creating custom stencils has always been probably the most confusing thing for some folks, because when you create a custom stencil, you actually have to add it as a household, but the household type is stencil. So when you go into our stencil library and you copy over a public stencil that you want, you then have to access that copy version that is now your stencil to manipulate however you would like. And where are you going to access that? You can do it here in the household index list, searching for it, or you can simply just use the search bar here, but I'm going to take you to the household index list. Okay. Now, for a lot of these stencils, if you don't see it right away, like here, okay, you can use the filter. People always forget about the power of the household index list. And in fact, I'm feeling inclined, I think in the next month or two, that I'm going to do a webinar strictly on how you can look for opportunities using the household index list, using columns, and also using filters. But for the purpose of today's training, I'm going to show you how you can filter out all of your stencil households so that you can look at them. So what you're going to do is you're going to click the filter button, and you're going to click this option, the fourth one down, called status, and you're going to say is stencil, apply filter. So it takes my 235 households and it brings us back here, okay, where I can see any of those stencils listed. All right, and then I could click into the stencils to make those updates. Now, what I'm going to do though here is I'm actually going to look for that stencil. So I'm going to type 0.1 like this, and it's going to take a moment. Oh no, come on. Let me refresh my screen here. Let me go back into my household. Give me a second. Stencil, apply stencil, 0.1 dot. Okay. Got to go into this copy version. So you can come in here and you could type in the keyword copy. Of course, now it's not working for me. Okay, well, in theory, you should be able to then navigate into that stencil itself so that you can make the updates. They must be doing an update on my Access, and I apologize for that because I have a special login, so it is possible that they are working on my Access behind the scenes. So I will talk to somebody about that. But in the meantime, what we could do here is we can come in here, we click filter, we look for status, we mark that as stencil, and then we go ahead and click apply. And then from there, we would be able to see any of the stencils that have been added into our personal library. Oh, there it is, right up at the top. See, it took me a second, just had to load. Okay, so when we use that, we just scroll up to the top. This is the copy version. So all you're going to do is you're going to click into that household, okay? And you can click on the asset map report and look at that. These are all the pieces that make up this traditional fact finder stencil. But in this household, this is a copy version that I can now manipulate. So I can come in here and I could say, you know what, for this particular stencil, I don't want anything to do with long-term care. I don't want any individual policies. I only want to get some like personal term, permanent life, like those kinds of things. I don't want these. I always find myself deleting them. Okay, let's just say, for example, okay, I could say, look, listen, most of the people I work with, the types of people I work with, they don't typically have pensions. Maybe I'll leave it just to be safe. Okay, but I could come in here and I could make some edits. Okay, 9 out of 10 times I might already have their home and mortgage information, so maybe I don't want these placeholders. Just bear with me for the example. Okay, I can delete those. Now I just deleted these pieces permanently from this copy version of this stencil, but I can also manually add anything I want. So I can use the actions menu and I could say, you know what, oftentimes like the people I'm working with, they are like, I work with a lot of teachers, so they often have like a 403B. I could either add something in here, or I could say, you know what, I would actually prefer this active plan to have the 403B in the naming listed first. So I could even just come in here like this, then do 401k like this, and I could go ahead and click update. Now, we could also intentionally add some notes, okay, within these stencil placeholders. So maybe anytime I use this stencil moving forward in the salary, in the notes section, I want to ask like, how long do you see yourself working here? Okay, and you could ask a question like that, and I'll show you how it'll work moving forward. So let's pretend, right, that in this stencil that I took from the public library, I created a copy. Now within my own household index list, I went into the copy version and I changed the placeholders to represent what it is I'm looking for in this new version of the stencil. But now we might want to think about renaming it, right? And where we do that is on the household index page for this stencil. So you're going to click this little edit button. Okay, and you're going to rename this. And I could call this LJ's General Fact Finder. Okay, just bear with me for the example. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. And I like to put stencil in the name always, just so I don't get confused. Okay, so I change the name and I go ahead and I click save. Now, I have now taken a stencil that was pre-built and I adjusted it in the copy version to now be what I want it to be. So now watch, if I go back into that household that we were working on, the Covey household, and I click back on their asset map report, If I right click my mouse and I click stencil, apply stencil under my stencils, you're like, oh no, it's not at the top anymore. But remember, we renamed it. So if I scroll down, you're going to see LJ's General Fact Finder stencil. And now moving forward, every time I use this stencil, it's going to be comprised of these placeholders. So this is just a perfect example of how you don't have to start completely from scratch. If you love some of our stencils from our public library, but you'd like to tweak them just a little bit, you want to add a couple things, you want to remove a couple things, this is the best thing you can do. Within a household, just come to the stencil option, go into the public library, pick the one that you want to add a copy of it to your personal library. Like I could do this business financials one. Okay, click add. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a copy version. Then you can go into the household index list. You can use that filter like I taught you, and you can then access it to make adjustments. So again, I could click back here, go into my household index list, click my filter, and I could go ahead and click status. Now, bear in mind that in today's example, you can see that there is a tiny second delay. So sometimes you might have to give it a minute or two before it'll populate in here. Don't panic. Okay, I panicked for a second because I was like, well, that's not usual behavior, but it is actually behaving the way that it's supposed to. There is a slight delay. So when you first do it, you're going to be like, well, I just copied it over and I don't see it. Don't panic. Just give it a minute or two. And then when you're ready, you can come in here and you can change the filter, make it stencil for the status. Okay, and you can search it and then it'll have anything listed here. Okay, and again, it'll take a minute or two. But then especially the ones when you copy them over, they're all named with a number in the front. So like right now, I'm like, oh no, I don't see it, but I will. Probably in about a minute or two, it'll populate there. And then I can click into that stencil and I can manipulate it and I can change the name of it moving forward. Okay. All right. So let's see if there's any questions that anyone wants to ask today. A good time to do that would be now to use the chat feature. Okay. To go ahead and submit those. But I do want to take us through a very quick poll. So I am curious to know from all of you, if you love Asset Map, and if you are, would you be willing to leave a very quick review? Okay. Take a second, answer the poll. Now is also a good time to add any questions that you might have. Okay. Do me a favor. If the answer is yes, okay, I'm going to ask you to take things one step further and to just do the quick review for me now, because it really should take you little to no time in order to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and post a link, okay, in the chat for you all to be able to access. I'm just asking that you leave us a Google review, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to come here and you're going to click on the link like so, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and go over back into my application so that you can see exactly what you're going to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on the link that I just posted in the chat, and it's going to come to a page that looks like this. Then from there, you're going to click where it says Google reviews, and you're going to have the opportunity to add a review, okay, or edit or add. I did one as an example so that you could see what it looks like, okay? When will the replay be available? Great question. It'll probably be available in about an hour. That's when you can expect it. Now, a great question that just came in from the chat about, you mentioned printing asset maps for our clients, best way to print. Great question. So let's say, for example, okay, I'm going to go back to that Covey household just so that you can see it. Let's say, for example, that I want to engage these folks with a stencil applied. Well, again, I just follow the steps. Okay, there's my copy. See, it already loaded. Okay, and I overlay a stencil. Doesn't matter what it is. Let's say that you wanted to print this report so that you could present their map with the stencil placeholders available. Okay, you're going to do that using your menu on the left, going into reports, and then you're just going to choose to include the cover page, the asset map report default. We do automatically include target maps. If you don't have target maps ran yet, though, you should probably hide those because there's no reason in having an empty report. You can pick and choose other reports in the middle between here if you like the balance sheet, the notes report, policy summary, member inventory, financial inventory, you name it. Disclosures at the bottom, that's locked in as well. You click generate report and that'll be it there. The last thing I want to show you all before I conclude, let me end this poll and get it out of your way. Okay, get that out of the way. The last thing I want to show you before we kind of wrap up today is, let me show you how you could use a stencil completely from scratch. Okay. I could come in here like this and I could click add household and I click manual entry. And let's say that I got a primary client or a prospective client that's coming in. Okay. I got a guy who's coming in. His name is Marty Bird. People who know me know that I like to use this as an example for a fake client. Okay. I got a guy coming in. His name is Marty Bird. He also has a wife. Her name's Wendy. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add her in too. Okay. I wanted them to fill out the discovery fact finder. They didn't. But guess what? They're coming in for a meeting anyway. And now I'm kind of in a pickle. Well, I could just bare minimum add Marty and Wendy, scroll down, click add household. That took me what? Less than 30 seconds. Then from here, immediately I could right click my mouse, click stencil, apply stencil. I could come to the public library and I could use just the generic fact finder, or better yet, listen, I made a copy of that and instead I adjusted it and made it my own. And that's my general fact finder stencil. I could click on that and I could click apply. And you could see that this could be really powerful. And even if I wanted to, I could just print copies of that report and they could scribble and they could take notes and I could scribble and I could take notes. And then I could manually add the details digitally later. Or I put the paper copies in front of them and I put this on the screen and I say, listen, part of the level of service that I provide to everyone I work with is I like to build them their very own map. Now, this is an asset. This is something you're going to be able to keep for your family and for your records. But more importantly, this is the foundation in order for me to be able to help you. I have to know where you are today. And guess what? It's not about whether I'm going to manage assets or not, or if you have other people helping you, that's great. It's not about you have to have all these placeholders that you see here or you're not going to be successful. No, the number one thing that we can do is just first understand where you are today so we can focus on where you want to go so that I can help you get there. So let's start. What about employment? And let's go through, and then you could go through and you can add it. Okay. Also, if you have a delegate or if you got a team of people that are assisting you and maybe they're going to just be like manually entering a lot of clients where you already have all their data. I've also seen some, paraplanners and folks that like to use the stencil as just a guide for themselves when they're manually entering the data. So they're not doing it in front of the client, they're just doing it behind the scenes. So there's a lot of different ways I've seen some people use that there. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay. Do we have the ability to share this with a prospecting client and have them complete it? Great question. There's not a way to like digitally take this and send it off to somebody and say like, hey, fill this out. Okay. But what you can do is you can choose to include it. Like you can download the report and use it and send it via secure or via email. You could say, hey, take a look at this map that I started to build for you. I put a number of placeholders. If in fact you do have any of these items and or you want to learn more about some of these products, please reach out to me and let me know. Okay. And that would be a way that you could set up additional time. But to answer your question specifically, I think where if you really want to streamline the data entry piece, I think a lot of people choose to schedule like a quick, 15-30-minute meeting and they do it digitally on the screen just so that they can capture the information in real time. Okay. Great question. Can you say when you'll be introducing the client portal? That is a great question. So depending on your level of access, like for enterprise clients, I don't think it's been approved yet because we did do a soft release on the client portal. So depending on your level of access, you may already have some level of access to it. This is a perfect time to point out resources. So you can always click on the chat bubble on the upper right-hand side. That's where you can live chat our team. That's where you can ask us questions via our support center. Okay, this is also where you can search for help. So you could type in something like client portal or type in Stencil Library or anything like that. But again, disclaimer, if you are an enterprise client, we are going through the steps with compliance and whatnot, depending on your company to get things like that approved. So just, it's likely that you don't have access to that yet. Okay. Can you show how to add Marty and Wendy again? Sure. What you're going to do from your homepage is you're going to click add household. You're going to click the manual entry option if that's how you want to do, like what I just did. And you'll have to select what type of household this is. This is a client, prospect, and then you'll add your primary client first, like I did here, like this. Okay. You add in the person, you add in their gender, click add member, and then you can add in their spouse, you can add in their kids, you can add in their business, their trust if you want to. Or even if you just want to add one person, you could always just click add household like this. Oh, sorry, you have to give it a name. Sorry, household name. Then when you click add household, you just have to create the shell of the household first. Then you can continue adding on top of the household here. So even though I just added Marty, I could just use my actions menu here. I could add in his wife, I could add in his kids, his businesses, etc. Okay. Now, in theory, I would want to delete this because I've created a duplicate household, but I think you get me. Would you suggest adding the main checking account balance since that changes so regularly? Great question. Listen, I mean, at the end of the day, banking accounts are still like vital accounts that people have, right? They check on them pretty regularly, or they don't. But either way, it's an asset. So I would argue that, in my opinion, most financial professionals do add the main checking account, and just the balance based off of whatever the last statement or amount that they told you that it is. And again, this is just an opportunity that, listen, every time you meet with people, like if I switch to a household here, information's going to change. That's normal. That's part of our financial journey. But even if I move to this household here, the last time I talked to them, they told me I have $12,000 in checking. But if I haven't talked to them in, let's say, like 5 months, then yeah, the next time we meet, we're going to need to ask for what that updated number is. Okay. Oh, yes. Some people making jokes to me about the fact that I used Marty and Wendy Bird. Thank you for that. I appreciate you. Does the discovery process go through the items of a stencil? It does not. So that's why stencils are often the next step after discovery. So when you click add household and you send somebody through that discovery fact finder, you're either creating an outbound link, a personalized welcome page with their name already on it, but the preset fact finder sending that off to somebody, or you're sending somebody your inbound link. Your inbound link is going to be what you can send off to multiple people at a time, because again, you gate the initial experience. Okay. Most of you on today's call likely have access to both. If you only have access to outbound, that could be due to your level of your license. And that might be something that you might want to look into potentially upgrading to make sure you get the inbound link, because this is really where people are strategically using that discovery inbound link for like marketing and like lead generation and things like that. If you have questions about that, we can always talk to you about it too. When adding in income, the numbers in red when inputted, but I see the income numbers are black on your screen. Did I do something wrong? Okay, great question. So anytime if you're adding an income and the numbers are red, it means you added in a negative income. Okay, so it just means that you accidentally hit the minus sign when you entered the value, and it probably was just an accident. But that would be the only reason why it would be showing as red. It means that it is an expense. It is a negative number. Where can you find the recordings? Great question. So a lot of you, this might be your first time coming to an Accelerate Series webinar. Maybe you liked it. Maybe you liked me. Maybe you want to watch some of the last trainings back. Well, you can. So all you have to do is click here into the chat bubble on the upper right-hand side, or the floating help button on the bottom right. Either one will open it up. From there, you're going to click where it says search for help. And all you will have to do is type in Accelerate, like so. And there's going to be a first option that'll say webinars Accelerate. So you're going to click on that. From there, okay, you're going to see where there's a link here that says visit Accelerate Series webinars. And that's going to show you all of the past ones that we've done. Okay. I've got the last several that I've done here, and I even have some archived ones that go farther back. So there you go. You can find them there. Yeah, okay. So there's some questions coming in about the asset map report, okay, in terms of like how things are structured. So just remember that you've got the legend at the bottom. It tells you like why boxes are outlined in a certain color, but it is based off of asset type. So if you never knew that that's why retirement assets are outlined in pink or cash flow sources are outlined in light blue, that is why. It's because of the legend that you see at the bottom. If you don't see that at the bottom, you can enable it. Just right click your mouse, go over toggle visibility, and just make sure that this legend box is checked. And if you're still like kind of new to the platform, you're just kind of figuring some of that stuff out. So we're always here to help you. Don't forget that you can reach out to our support team via phone. You can also reach out to us via that live chat. You can email our team if you prefer. Okay. In terms of next steps, as we kind of wrap up today's webinar, and I promise I'll look at additional questions if I missed any in the chat. I just want to make sure that I don't keep anybody past our allotted time up until 4. So please just know that we will be hosting another Accelerate series next month. I think I'm probably going to do it on mining your household index, just learning kind of how to use the columns and the filters potentially to your advantage. For those of you that do love AssetMap and you would be willing to leave us a quick review, you don't have to do it through G2. I'll just ask that you do it via Google. That would mean the world to us. Again, I'm going to repost that in the chat for easy access for you. Other than that, just stay tuned. If you have interest in wanting to come to boot camp is actually next week. It's Tuesday through Thursday. If you have interest in wanting to learn more about that, please reach out to our support team. We have probably like 1 or 2 spots left, if I'm being honest, because it's a very, very big group this time. Everybody wants to come. So if you can't make it to this next one that's happening next week, we'll be hosting another probably in sometime in May. We host them once a quarter. Other than that, that's all I have for us. The last thing is, please let me know what you thought of today's training. This is not leaving AssetMap a review. This is leaving me a review as your trainer today. I'd love to know what you thought of today's training. Was it valuable? My hope is yes. Again, thank you for your patience in the beginning as we were getting the audio worked out. Other than that, that's all I have for us today. I'm going to stop our recording, but I will remain on the line to answer any following ending questions. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great day.